Warriors of Light, think back to when you first began your adventure. Did you wake up on a carriage and share the ride with Alphino, Elezen, and a couple drunk Moogles? Perhaps you think you may know all there is to know about Gridania and the Black Shroud. If you would like to pull up a seat and fetch a drink, pray join me in this scholarly study into the history of Gridania and the individuals that made the forest city-state what we know it today. Before we begin, this essay is going to be a long one, and took a lot of work to make. There is no team behind this video or this channel, just me. I do the research, write the script, edit the audio and video, record the footage, and manage the channel. As such, it would mean a lot to me if you would subscribe and leave a like if you enjoy the video. It'll let YouTube know to spread the word and attract more viewers. Leaving a comment helps a lot as well, and I'd love to hear your own thoughts on the topic of Gridania. And if this video does well, I'll make more lore videos on other Final Fantasy XIV topics. Now, without further delay, I present to you the tale of Gridania, Nature's Balance. To begin at the beginning, over 1500 years ago before the present day, the continent of Aldernod found itself reeling from the passage of the 5th Umbral Era. With the fledgling days of the 6th Astral Era, humanity had begun anew. The Hyur, with their ever-growing population, migrated south from the frozen climes of northern Ilsabard and into the lands that would be known as Eorzea. Due to their nomadic tendency to move from one land to another, the Hyur often found themselves at odds with other native clans and tribes that called these lands home. Such is the case with the Elezen, who were proud to call Eorzea home since the days of the First Astral Era. With the Hyur beginning to colonize their ancestral home in the plains in the year of 660, the Elezen were forced to immigrate to new lands. Some to the lands north in Korthis, and others to the forest of the Black Shroud to the south. Unbeknownst to the Elezen, the Shroud was already home to the Elementals, the very same beings that ushered in the tidal waves that flooded the realm to bring about the 6th Umbral Calamity, to punish the Magi for their flagrant misuse of magics. Given their past experience, the Elementals did not believe that man could be trusted. At first, the Elezen were unaware of what was harrying them, until they realized the Shroud was alive with the magical beings within her boughs, and ensconced into the depths of the caves beneath the forest, but not without losing many of their number to the almighty power of the Elementals. It was here that the Elezen made their home, cowering in the damp and musty caverns before the Hyur came again, with another migration 5 decades later in the year of 710. Like the Elezen, the Hyur found themselves taking shelter underground from the force of the Elementals. However, this time the Elezen were not willing to give up their land, lest they be decimated by their ethereal gatekeepers above. Skirmishes broke out over the right for territory, eventually giving way to all-out war between the two races. After another 3 decades of fighting, the Hyur and Elezen at last came to understand their common complication, and made a pact in the year of 740. With this conjoined partnership, they came together to form the subterranean kingdom of Gilmora. For the next 300 years, the peoples of Gilmora expanded the caverns and cave systems to build their kingdom. The Tamtaro Deepcroft would be built to house the remains of rulers and nobles even to the present day. But fortune would come once the Elementals deigned to banish the Ixal beast tribes from the Black Shroud, punishing them for logging and deforestation due to increased population without the consent of their ethereal masters, forcing them to migrate to Zelphatol near Abalathia's Spire. This introduced an opportunity for the Gilmorans to vie for the land above, with the Ixal no longer claiming the forest. Those versed in the art of magic honed their craft and, through over 50 years of diligent trial and error, managed to commune with the Elementals. The successful conjurer was the Huron leader of the mages known as Joran Lightheart, who managed to come to an accord with the Elementals that the Gilmorans would be permitted to live in the Black Shroud so long as they respected the Elementals' authority over the Twelveswood and valiantly defended their new home. As proof of the accord, the Elementals granted a blessing to Joran in the form of a glowing light. From that day forward, the once quarrelsome Huron Elezen made their way topside and began to establish a new home for themselves. Within the next year, in 1077, construction on the city-state of Gridania began, and Quarry Mill was founded in the South Shroud, named as such for the stone cut and harvested to build their new home. All the materials used to create the city, from its stone, to the lumber, to even the wildlife slain for pelts and leathers, was only taken after asking the Elementals' permission, so as not to enrage their hosts and to preserve the balance of the wood. With a new city came new customs. In time, the new people of Gridania would come to worship Nofika, the matron, and believe the elementals were born of her essence. Many festivals would be held to honor them. The standard of Gridania would be formed out of the history of her peoples. The white lily signifies the first communion with the elementals, while the golden field represents the lands blessed by their power. And finally, the twin serpents enshrine the brotherhood of the Elezen and Heer of Gilmora that joined together to eventually raise Gridania. Those who could speak with the elementals would come to be known as hearers, who would serve on the advising government body known as the Seedseer Council. However, not all were as welcome to the change. A number of Gilmorans did not want to abandon their home of the past 3 centuries, and remained below ground even after the kingdom of Gilmora fell to ruin. These came to be known as the Duskwhite Elezen, creating a new fracture in their kind. The Duskwhites came to see their surface-dwelling brethren, now known as Wildwood Elezen, as traitors, and to this day their disdain for Gridanians remains, leading to racial tensions between the two cultures. After 4 years, Joran is blessed with a son, but oddly, he was born with 2 round bumps on the top of his head. As he grew, these bumps gradually became protruding horns. As a small child, he displayed the ability of prophecy, able to foresee the coming of torrential rainstorms, a blight in the apple orchard, and a plague of catfish. He comes to be heralded as a child of the gods. At the age of 12 summers, the boy appears to stop aging. The people feared he had grown mysteriously ill, but the child disagreed, claiming it was proof that the elementals had chosen him as the mediator between man and spirit. The people realized this was the result of the light bestowed upon Joran. From that moment on, he called himself Eohokpota, taking after the sound the ethereal waves made when the elementals addressed him. Accepting this change, Joran and his children took on the surname Pota. Over 12 summers later, in the 12th century of the 6th astral era, a second Huron child was born with horns. Eohok, now 36, adopts the child into his care and gives him the name Ukota Num. From then on, all Huron children born with horns are known as Pagels, and are raised with care in the Stillglade Fane. At age 42, Eohok is deemed the Elder Seedseer, after serving as the de facto leader of Gridania. Anyone with this title is the head of the Seedseer Council, acting out the will of the elementals in service to the people of Gridania. Over another century later, the Heer of Gridania would begin to fall ill and pass away at an alarming rate, symptoms manifesting as chain-like patterns on their skin. It was discovered that the Chigos that made their home in the Twelveswood had a high likelihood to spread a disease that would be called the Creeping Death. The disease ran rampant through the city until finally, 5 years later, an alchemist from Ul'dah discovered a cure derived from glimshrooms. But by the time it was widely dispensed, nearly all the Heer in the Shroud had been claimed by the plague, drastically altering the racial demographic of Gridania. In the present day, the Creeping Death can be cured by conjury, and the Trappers League runs stringent tests on Chigo eggs to prevent another outbreak. In 1353, at the ripe old age of 272 summers, Eohokpota passes away peacefully while meditating. He shows no signs of foul play or illness, and thus did the guidance of the first Elder Seedseer come to an end. At around 1360, the Ixal were facing a crisis. Children were no longer being born with pinion feathers, meaning that they were steadily losing the ability to fly. Some believed it to be their curse for disobeying the elementals. Without flight, they could no longer hunt prey like they used to, and so they grew desperate and began trespassing into the Twelveswood, logging and hunting with reckless abandon. The Wood Whalers managed to repel them, costing the Ixal many lives and still no solution to their food shortage. In response, Gridania forged the God's Quiver, a collection of highly skilled archers whose purpose was to guard the Twelveswood from any outside threat, namely the Ixal, as they began to develop new means of flight in the form of dirigibles over the next several decades. The arrow-slinging quivers could counter their flying enemies with far more ease than the grounded whaler lancers. In 1452, a fire was started and burned down a portion of the Twelveswood. The elementals were enraged by this travesty, and brought the Green Wrath down upon the people of Gridania. The Green Wrath is a terrible sickness that affects the psyche of the afflicted, and the treants of the forest are drawn to attack them. At risk of being evicted from the Twelveswood, many elderly Gridanians offered themselves in sacrifice to the elementals, and managed to assuage their ire. About 15 years later, King Manfred of Alamigo suddenly decreed that he was the rightful ruler of the East Shroud, and began an invasion south of the Veladina River, the border between the Black Shroud and Gridania. This sparked the beginning of the Autumn War. The Wood Whalers and Godsquiver responded with hundreds of able fighters, but were no match for the king's forces. The Gridanian soldiers were ambushed, losing over 6,000 fighters in the skirmish. After several failed attempts to push the Gridanians back, their efforts were all for naught, and the staff of the Elder Seedseer, Claustrum, was stolen. This marked the resolution of the First Battle of Tonolka, with a decisive victory for the Alamigan army. Reveling in their defeat, the Gridanians sent a request for reinforcements from the other city-states of Eorzea. The petition was met with eager soldiers rallying to the defense of the Twelveswood, for it had long been known that King Manfred had a crazed and reckless streak during his rule. His hunger for claiming new land was ravenous and unconcealed. With combined forces of all of Eorzea behind them, the Gridanians led the charge that eventually resulted in the fall of Alamigo's General Gilbard. King Manfred is wounded while attempting to maintain morale from the front line, pushing the leaderless army into East End and back into Gridania. With this, the Second Battle of Tonolka marked the end of the Autumn War. A year after the end of the war, the Lancers Guild is formed by former wood whaler Captain Mistale, taking all the knowledge of the art of the lance learned by observing various techniques used by travelers and visiting pikemen from other realms wishing to test the might of Gridania's wood whalers. In 1561, seeing the growing threat of the Garlean invasion, the Eorzean alliance was formed. A year later, the Ixals summoned Garuda for the first time, and with her blessing, managed to create air stones, which allowed them to fly their war balloons at will. They then expanded into Kurthis, where they established their aerial squadron base, Nadalen. Almost 10 years later, in 1572, the Order of the Twin Adders was created, alongside the other Grand Companies, in order to combat the invading Garlean legions at the behest of Archon Louisoix and the Circle of Knowing. The events of 1.0 Final Fantasy XIV takes place, and the fall of Dalamud leads to the 7th Umbral Era, beginning your journey in A Realm Reborn and beyond. In accordance with the founding of Gridania and the People's Pact with the Elementals, the motto of Gridania proudly proclaims, "Wood's will be done." Today, the distribution of races are as follows: 40% Midlander here, 30% Wildwood Elezen, 10% Duskwhite Elezen, 10% Keeper of the Moon Makote, and 10% Other. It comes as no surprise that the main industry of Gridania would be forestry and carpentry. As discussed previously, all the wood that goes into construction and craft is sourced from very specific groves of the Twelveswood. Felling timber only is directed by the hearers who negotiate with the elementals. For every tree harvested, a new sapling is planted in its place, ensuring the preservation of the forest. With this boon of nature's bounty, there is little the carpenters of Gridania cannot fashion, be it buildings, armaments, riverboats, and everyday goods. The pride of the craft are the water wheels one can find all throughout Gridania that drive the city's industry, using the natural currents of the Jadeite flood. Most Gridanians have forgone the hunting of the Twelveswood game for food in place of a vegan diet supplied by the orchards and crops throughout the Shroud. Citizens share large gardens inside the city to plant fruit and vegetables. Animal husbandry is forbidden to maintain the ecosystem, and thus there is little dairy to be found. Those that do partake in the hunting of game are subject to the regulations of the Trappers League, essentially park rangers telling hunters what they can and can't hunt, and how much of any animal they can bring home. The League also combats poachers who may inadvertently upset the balance of the forest. Hunters also provide the hides and bones of their bounty to the Leatherworkers Guild, allowing them to craft works admired the entire world over, ensuring that no part of the animal is left to go to waste. The main dish of Gridania is a tonic made of muntui beans. Drinks and dishes made of fermented muntui have gained renown the world over, even rising to be considered a delicacy. Due to their close dependence on the whims of the elementals, Gridanians can come off as stubborn compared to the people of the other city-states of Eorzea. They can be brittle and difficult to negotiate with in accordance with their laws of the forest. This often leads to a less than hospitable welcome to the outsiders of the Twelveswood, as those visiting often are unaware of the strict guidelines of the elementals, and risk the peace and livelihood of all who dwell in the forest. Prior to the 7th Umbral Calamity, the Seedseer Council formed the highest body of government in Gridania. being comprised of several talented conjurers known as hearers that communicated the elementals' wills and passed them down to the guilds and the military. However, since the beginning of the 7th Umbral Era, the Elder Seedseer has held direct control over the council and the affairs of the city. Kane Senna serves as the Elder Seedseer. Born the eldest of 3 Patron children, Kane was a highly skilled conjurer by age 6, experiencing visions and telling prophecies of deadly fires and locust swarms. By age 12, she was made a hearer and placed on the Seedseer Council. Upon rising to the head of the council, Kane set out into the Twelveswood with her siblings, Arun and Raya-O, to commune with the elementals. Kane would speak, Arun would respond on behalf of the elementals, and Raya-O would listen. From that day forward, Kane decreed that the role of Elder Seedseer would be the work of herself and her siblings to ensure the will of the elementals were clearer than ever before. He returned to the city proper with the elementals warning of Dalamud's fall to form the Order of the Twin Adder. Her staff is the ritual heirloom of the Elder Seedseers of generations past, Claustrum, which was crafted out of the branches that fell from the canopy when the Great One awakened, to commune with the hearers. Its name is derived from a word meaning key, as it is capable of dispelling any of the elementals' wards. Her personal guards are known as the Keepers of the Entwined Serpent. Among their number is a Huron man who Kane rescued from the battlefield at Cartano, taking him into her care and freeing him from the fate of a Garlean conscript. The Seedseers have since functioned as Kane's advising body. Throughout the years, it is rare that more than one Seedseer would occupy the role at any given time. However, at present, this role is held by Raya-O and Arun. Before the calamity, the Seedseers would meet at the Lotus Stand, debating and interpreting the will of the elementals before placing matters into a vote. As of A Realm Reborn, Kane holds full power over the decisions of running the state until such time that the need for the Forum of Seedseers are required. Raya-O is the second oldest of the 3 Senna siblings at 21 summers. Though she cannot hear the voices of the elementals as well as her older sister, she is unmatched in her ability for cleansing and purging as a white mage. She is accompanied by her 2 loyal Moogle companions, Kupchakupa and Puknipak. Arun is the youngest of the 3 siblings at 18 years old. His ability to hear and comprehend the elementals is peerless, even when compared to Kane. Because of this, he often heard the elementals' voices over those of his fellow Gridanians, leading him to grow rather reclusive and with little social interaction, though Kane ensured he grew up with the proper care. As such, he is often one of few words. As a boy learning conjury, he took fondly to an odd cane with a face upon it that rattled noisily as magic ran through it. Should your Warrior of Light take to learning white magic, you will be closely familiar with the younger Senna siblings. Oap Pessi is another hearer among the council, whose skill in conjuring and communion with the elementals were so strong that it's widely agreed that he would have been Elder Seedseer in another time. He is the council's local historian, well versed in history and the tales of the Allegan Empire. He is also tasked with dispelling the dark divinity Odin that has roamed the Black Shroud since the day of the calamity. The Order of the Twin Adder is comprised of 7 different groups. First are the long-standing Wood Whalers, specializing in lances and pole arms, who defend the Twelveswood from within. The God's Quiver are the archers formed when the Ixal first trespassed into the Shroud, protecting the forest from outside threats. Before the calamity, these 2 forces worked independently of the Twin Adders, but were brought into the fold after the conclusion of the battle. The main body of the order pertains to the other 5 units. The Blue Badgers are engineers and sappers that recruit from the gathering and crafting guilds, in order to forge and craft armaments and armor. The Red Otters are the elite combat unit made of specially chosen lancers, archers, and conjurers from the respective guilds. The White Wolves are made up of young recruits who serve as combat troops. The Black Boars serve as espionage, logistics, and support their other units, formed from retired Wood Whalers and God's Quiver members. And finally, the Yellow Serpents is a unit comprised solely of adventurers, who aid the other main units when called upon, which would mean that if your Warrior of Light is allied with the Twin Adders, they would serve among the Yellow Serpents. The Grand Serpent Marshal is Swethric Brookstone, a Midlander of 42 summers and military advisor to Kane Senna. He was once captain of the Wood Whalers before he lost an eye defending a comrade during an Ixal attack. He left thereafter and began training new initiates of the Lancers Guild, until the Twin Adders were formed, and his experience as a leader in military prowess would bring him to become Grand Serpent Marshal. Vorse Ulua is the officer in charge of the Wood Whalers' Yellow Serpents. He was an adventurer himself in his late teens, and set out beyond the Twelveswood to seek fame and fortune. His name quickly grew as he discovered pirate treasure in Vilbrand, among other great deeds of cunning and bravery. Upon request from a friend, he made his way to Ishgard and enlisted as a mercenary, eventually serving under House Fortamp. Due to his great skill with the lance and his reputation around Eorzea, he was granted the role of Serpent Commander within the Twin Adders. Warriors of Light allied with the Twin Adders are very familiar with Commander Ulawa, and he will never back down from a good triple triad match. Though the order is meant to symbolize a union of the Huron and Elezen that founded Gridania, other races that called the city home once showed their discomfort that it did not take their presence and role in Twelveswood into account. Kane eventually quieted these stirrings, citing that the order also represented the brotherhood between the three city-states during the time of the Autumn War. The Wood Whalers, formed in the early days of Gridania since the first communion with the elementals, are tasked with defending the Twelveswood from internal threats, and are masters of the spear. They keep the peace from their garrison in Gridania proper, from hamlets and their watchposts throughout the forest. Patrols wander the wood, keeping an eye out for any crimes against the Shroud or its people. The Whalers will often defend the Shroud at any cost, even at the risk of the elemental's ire. Thus, they wear wooden masks that cover the top half of their faces. However, elementals do not distinguish men by their physical appearance, but rather the quality of their soul, and as such, there is little consensus that their mask really accomplishes anything at all, other than being part of their traditional uniform. Swethina Brookstone, sister to Grand Serpent Marshal Swethric Brookstone, is the commander of the Wood Whalers since her brother suffered his eye injury leading him to stepping down. She is ever training in the art of the lance, and always seeks to outdo herself. Her high standards are often tiring and frustrating to the men under her command, but her prowess as a leader is never left to question. As she is the same age as Oapesi, the two grew up as best friends, and have even taken to the battlefield together on a number of occasions. The following is the organizational structure of the Wood Whalers, listing each unit's jurisdiction. 1st Spears, Recruitment and Training. 2nd Spears, Gridania proper. 3rd Spears, Central Shroud. 4th Spears, East Shroud. 5th Spears, Northern South Shroud. 6th Spears, Southern South Shroud. 7th Spears, Eastern North Shroud. 8th Spears, Western North Shroud. 9th Spears, Poacher Eradication. 10th Spears, West Shroud. Established in 1363 of the 6th Astral Era, the Quivermen of the God's Quiver were a response to the Ixali attack a year earlier, responsible for protecting the Black Shroud from foreign attack. Made primarily of well-trained archers, the God's Quiver keep a watchful eye along the borders of the Shroud from their watchtowers. More often than not, these threats come in the form of the Ixal raids and their war balloons. There are 12 units and exactly 150 archers to fill the ranks. Unlike the Wood Whalers, the Quivermen do not remain at the same station for the entirety of their service, and instead exchange posts regularly so the archers can be well acquainted with the lay of the forest and can be ready for an attack anywhere in the Shroud. The structure of the God's Quiver is as follows, with each unit listed alongside their leader. The Quiver's Rams, also known as the White Rams, is led by 1st Bow Mish Molkat. The Quiver's Bulls, also known as the Gold Bulls, are led by 1st Bow Morisho the Unbroken. The Quiver's Twins, 1st Bow Mian Thousand Malms. The Quiver's Crabs, 1st Bow Coiled Serpent. The Quiver's Lions, 1st Bow Joseph Seal. The Quiver's Virgins, 1st Bow Gapakaba Dora. The Quiver's Scales, 1st Bow Ragato Swan. The Quiver's Scorpions, 1st Bow Clorowas Orbel. The Quiver's Centaurs, 1st Bow Galfred Mossback. The Quiver's Goats, 1st Bow Trian the Youngest. The Quiver's Ewers, 1st Bow Debbie Palali. The Quiver's Whales, 1st Bow Lewin Hunt, the God's Quiver's Bowlord. Lewin Hunt is the Bowlord of the God's Quiver. As a child, he and his father would spend their days tracking and hunting game. His aim with a bow was incredible, so much so that the Quivers beckoned him into their ranks. He refused their many offers, until one day his wife was kidnapped and killed by an Ixal pikeman, just a few short days after their wedding. He went straight to the God's Quiver and thrust himself into his work, protecting the Black Shroud for over 30 years. The Archers Guild began as a group of Trappers League members that would take part in archery competitions, eventually breaking away and forming a guild of their own. The art of Gridanian archery began with strife, much like the city itself. The Elezen who would use longbows would quarrel with the Makote who used short bows. The Elezen wanted to protect the forest, and the local Makote tended to be poachers. In the end, the two practitioners came together to form the hallmark guild that taught a special form that combined the best of both styles. Lucienne Korn is the guildmaster of the Archers Guild. Wanting to follow in her father's footsteps as a great archer among the gods' quiver, she took to learning and master the bow. She joined the Archers Guild at a young age, and soon rose through the ranks to become a leader in her own right. Elezen have held the lance in high regard since ancient times, used in hunting in the years of Eld. Gilmoran royalty turned to the lance for defense, and the Gridanians have used it to protect their people and the forest since the founding of the Wood Whalers. The Gridanians' skills with polearms have brought them worldwide renown, attracting all manner of lancers to challenge them and see their prowess firsthand. Mistel, a captain of the Wood Whalers, saw the value in these sparring matches pitting the techniques of many different peoples against each other, and resigned from his post to found the Lancers Guild. Now the Lancers Guild is a place for those seeking to learn the art to absorb the knowledge of spearmanship from all walks of life. Ewain Deepwell was once a wood whaler of sterling repute before he was discharged for taking the blame for a friend's malpractice. He took to the road as an adventurer. Even his commander Swethina discovered his innocence and begged for him to return. After being declined time and time again, Swethina offered him a place as the leader of the Lancers Guild, which Ewain accepted without hesitation. In the aftermath of the Sixth Umbral Calamity, most of the teachings of magic were lost amongst the torrential waves. Though some of the Gilmorans who had passed down what knowledge was left were able to weave feeble spells in order to commune with the elementals. From these arcane beings, they were able to learn much more in the art of divining magic from nature itself, and thus founded the Conjurers Guild. Originally designed to instruct hearers in the art of conjury, the guild has grown to welcome those from across the realm who would wish to learn the techniques to heal and embrace nature. Brother Isumiyan is the eldest of the Pagil living in Gridania, having stopped counting his name days past his 100th summer, though scholars estimate that he has walked no fewer than 230 years upon the star. With his many decades of wisdom, he instructs the younger Pagil in using their gifts in the art of conjury, and extends this welcome to any others seeking to learn. Working closely with the Trappers Guild, hunters are rarely able to collect their bounties without ever watchful eyes seeing their every move. The Leatherworkers Guild are charged with ensuring no remains of the creatures go to waste, and are known the realm over as Fen Eel's Fineries brand, for creating products of the highest quality using every ilm of the leather sourced from the forest. Geva Stork is the master of the Leatherworkers Guild, and the Fen Eel Fineries. The shoes she creates are world famous for their quality, beauty, and ensuring that every scrap is used in her designs to honor the animal sacrifice. As a guild master, Geva is strict and quick to lashing out, holding her students and members to the same high standard as herself. It would not be hyperbole to say that carpentry began with the Gridanians. With permission from the elementals, the trees they felled to use for wood went into every aspect of their lives, from building their city, their homes, and even the weapons they used to defend the forest. Partnering with the Botanists Guild, who procure their logs, the Carpenters Guild worked to furnish and arm the people of Gridania with utmost pride. They are also the ones who built the water wheels, which process the lumber and make Gridania's carpenters the most efficient woodworkers in the land. Viatan Mankroa is without a doubt one of the most passionate men in the field of woodworking that one could ever hope to find, and as such he has found his niche as the guildmaster of the Carpenters Guild. His motto that he lives by is know the wood, be the wood, and love the wood. His unabashed love of his craft has graced each of his pieces, from hewing to intricate carving. The Botanist Guild has existed since the beginning of Gridania's long history, collecting the wood for the Carpenters Guild and planting a seed in place of every tree and flower harvested. They pride themselves on working closely with the hearers to ensure the elemental's will are met, and that the people of Gridania have a roof over their heads. Fufucha Fucha is one of the rare Dunes folk Lalafell to be seen in the Twelveswood, having taken shelter in Gridania as a child after an Amalja raid in her home in Thanalan. She became the guildmaster of the Botanist Guild out of thanks and appreciation for the forest folk who took her in, wanting to give back to the community and treating her new home with the respect it deserves. Built around 200 years prior to the present day, the southern half of Gridania was created as an expansion to house the city's growing population, and make room for the barracks of the Order of the Twin Adders among the other guilds and businesses. Given the newer and more modern buildings, this area is known as New Gridania. The first of the 4 gates of Gridania, the Blue Badger Gate, takes its name from the mythical creatures that stand guard over the 4 cardinal directions. It leads to the central shroud through the Mistale Bridges, named after the founder of the Lancers Guild. Managed by innkeeper Boyle the Bold and manned by Antoine, the Roost is the most famous of Gridania's hostelries. Thanks to the airship landing for Highwind Skyways, one can find all manner of folk from all over the world, from adventurers to travelers to merchants sharing a drink or a meal together at the Carline Canopy, Gridania's foremost tavern. The flower from which the establishment is named appears to hold sentimental value for the tavern's owner, Mother Mion. The Canopy also serves as the local adventurers guild. Mother Mion is an herbalist and mixer of medicine who has a passion for tea, and is a childhood friend of Fagaga Figa. Mion has provided no small amount of effort to do her part for Gridania. As liaison between the city and the adventurers in her stead, she is a highly trusted individual who offers assistance to anyone who could put her guild members to work. Alala Felon Shipwright once came to Gridania and drew up plans for the hallmark water wheel for the city. He intended to build it as thanks to the minder of the watermill, who showed him kindness upon his arrival. However, the man grew sick and passed away before his creation could be brought to life. The shipwright's daughter, who the water wheel was named after, dedicated her work to finishing the feature. After 10 years of work in collaboration with the Carpenters Guild, the water wheel now sits as a proud landmark of Gridania, and its unique enclosed design is considered an engineering wonder. The Oak Atrium is home to the Carpenters Guild, including their sawmill and workshop. The sawmill is powered by Fagaga's gift, slicing through timber with astonishing speed. Just behind the Oak Atrium, the Acorn Orchard is a playground for Gridania's children and young at heart, built by the best woodworkers of the Carpenters Guild, allowing the children to feel and learn the properties of the forest that made up their home. While most adventurers would associate Quiver's Hold with the Archers Guild, it is actually the property and headquarters of the God's Quiver. From here, orders go out to every watchspire and unit throughout the Twelveswood. They permit the archers to use their archery butts for practice, and every day, the quivermen practice their skills alongside the apprentice archers. The Knot is considered the crossroads of Gridania, paved just beside the main Aetheryte Plaza and surrounded by watermills, connecting the north and south halves of the city and leading to the headquarters of the Order of the Twin Adder. The Adder's Nest is the headquarters of the Order of the Twin Adder, recently rebuilt after the Calamity. Adventurers aligning themselves with the Grand Company will find themselves making their way here for their squadrons and to trade in seals for their service. Another of the gates named after the mythical creatures of the cardinal directions, the White Wolf Gate leads to the Berlin's Bridges. Beyond is Sorrel Haven, in the central Shroud, where ferocious beasts and sprites prowl, prompting the guards to allow only experienced adventurers and those able to protect themselves to pass. Named for another mythical creature, the Red Otter Gate is a floodgate that serves anglers and fishers who wish to take to the Jadeite flood on their skiffs, looking to hook the forest's bounty. Old Gridania stands in a cleared-out portion of the Jadeite Thick, made early into the city-state's founding. Serving as the city's busy center of commerce, it is home to the Ebony and Rosewood stalls, and shops famed throughout the realm, including the Centaur's Eye and the Fen Eel fineries. The name of the Ebony and Rosewood stalls can be found in the folktales of Gridania, some dating back centuries before the Calamity. As it goes, a child of the elementals once perished, sending the other elementals into withdrawn grief. Their sadness caused snow to blanket the shroud, leaving the tree boughs frozen and the creatures fleeing for warmer climates. Then, a brother and sister entered the Twelveswood seeking food for their parents who had lost the will to live. They were separated from each other in the dark, began playing their ebony zither and rosewood pipe in order to find each other. The sound of the music and the light of the children's souls lifted the elementals from their melancholy, and the wintry spell over the forest was lifted. Near the Whaling Barracks, the West Shore Pier serves the ferries running to and from the East Shroud, ending in the Whispering Gorge. The Black Boar Gate is the fourth gate named after a mythical creature of the cardinal directions, and leads into the residential district reserved to the highest caste of Gridania citizens. Adventurers are turned away on the spot. A family of bowyers has owned the humble shop of the Centaur's Eye for over 150 years, most commonly selling longbows and short bows to the community. However, in recent years they have taken to adding lances and polearms to their inventory, given the rise of visiting adventurers and to satisfy the growing demand of the wood whalers. Named after an unfortunate attempt of an ambitious Gridanian merchant to hatch and breed Apkalus, Apkalu Fall is most fondly remembered as a place of meditation for Louis Soix during his time in Eorzea. It is also where adventurers will find Ymitra instructing summoners on their craft. Ymitra was born the 7th out of 12 sisters in the land of Sharlayan, where she attended the studium and specialized in the field of archaeology. Upon graduating, she joined the Sons of St. Coinac and crossed the sea to Eorzea to study the ruins of the Allegan Empire in Mordona, including the newly risen Crystal Tower. While there, the archaeologist uncovered tombstones detailing the existence of summoners, powerful mages that could weave the stolen essence of primals into their own arcane being to do their bidding. Excited by the discovery, Ymitra relocated to Gridania to continue studying the history of the summoners. Alongside the Sunsilk tapestries in Ul'dah, the Fen Ale fineries are known to the whole of Eorzea as the finest leather products on the market, and the finest artisans are able to craft luxurious items so popular that customers often wait moons, if not years, for their order. The famed minstrel Maketo raised the amphitheater with her own hard-earned coin. Upon completion, she gifted it to the people of Gridania. Scholars have since determined that the amphitheater's incredible acoustics, which have no rival within the realm of Eorzea, are on account of the ponds behind the stage. The Whistling Miller is home to the mill that produces Gridania's wheat and flour from the grains gathered by the Botanist Guild. It is named as such as passerbys would often give an airy whistle as they wandered past the mill. Hosting some of the most fertile and richest soil in the Twelveswood, the Great Lone Growery once belonged to a family of wealth and merchants for hundreds of years. One day, the family donated the acreage to Gridania in the name of Nofika the matron. The Botanist Guild now maintains the growery and distributes small plots to the most promising members of the guild. Raised after the Calamity, the Yellow Serpent Gate is the newest of all the egress gates in Gridania. Much like the other gates, it is named after a mythical creature, though this one is named after the creature that keeps vigil over the center point of the 4 cardinal directions. Devoted to the matron, Nofika's altar is a large stone plate set in the middle of a circle of pyres in the hollow of an ancient tree. During celebrations and tributes to the elementals, Gridanians will lay gifts of grain, fruit, meat, and fish in piles before the shrine. The Stillglade Fane is the home of the Conjurers Guild, stretching through the trunk of a great ancient tree and into the caverns below. The silence allows conjurers to meditate and practice their magics in peace, taking into the alcoves and lighting incense to focus their senses to the elementals' voices. The Wailing Barracks are the headquarters of the Wood Wailers, where citizens can petition for assistance with the guards, as well as a jail for those who disturb the peace of the Twelveswood. It is also home to the Lancers Guild, training alongside the experienced Wailers. The Central Shroud is the closest area of the Twelveswood to Gridania proper. Housing more rivers and lakes than the other sections of the Shroud, the Jadeite Flood sits to the north, the twin lakes known as the Mirror lies to the south, and the east and west vein streams flow through the interior. It is also home to numerous species of flora. The Jadeite Flood is the lake that forms the border between the Central Shroud and Gridania, spilling into the rivers that flow through the forest. The water is colored a deep green from reflecting the canopy above. Gilbert's Spire is named in honor of Gilbert Trueshot, a hero from the early days of Gridania's founding. As an archer of extraordinary skill, he was the first to be given the title Godbow. The Bannock is the training grounds for new initiates of the Order of the Twin Adder, built around the giant stump of a fallen tree. While there are theories why it was named as such, the more prevailing hypotheses are that the rations fed to the soldiers were named bannocks, or that the stump itself resembled the rations. After the Calamity, Bahamut's flares left the standing courses bereft of life and burned beyond recognition. The trees appear hunched over like men writhing in eternal agony. Spriggans flock to the area in search of corrupted crystals in large numbers, making it their domain in the Shroud. In the 5 years since the Calamity, they have consumed nearly all of the crystals, leaving what was left a barren wasteland. Thus, it was called Spriggan's Dig. Sorrel Haven is named as such for the sorrel leaves that fall from the trees in the area, leaving the damp forest floor a distinctive purple-brown hue. Originally built as a sanctuary for healers to meditate and commune in peace, Hawk Manor was sold to the Dardancourt House after an uproar from the people of Gridania calling the grounds a symbol for excess. The word hawk is a Pagel word meaning to speak without words. Lady Amandine Dardancourt was a particularly beautiful Elezen, who spent her wealth on beauty products and home remedies to maintain her porcelain features. Eventually it was rumored that she drank the blood of her housemaids in order to keep her young looks. During the Calamity, her face was horribly scarred, and she resorted to selling her soul to a void scent she had bequeathed Halicarnassus in order to save face. Though it is not known where the death gazes that roost at the sanguine perch came from, they quickly marked their territory by hanging the carcasses of their prey from the nearby trees. Hopeseed Pond was formed when the craters left by a shard of Dalamud flooded and filled the water. Because of the dense earth-aspected ether in the area, the flora in and around the pond tend to grow to gargantuan size. Bent Branch is the name of the crooked intersection of two trade routes, the fur line that leads northwest to Korthus, and the lumber line which wends south to Thanalan. The Chocobo Ranch, known as Mughul's Gift Mounts, is stocked with Ishgard's finest birds, so it's no surprise that the settlement of Bent Branch Meadows would grow around it. The balloon tethered to the roof of the stables is an XIV war vessel, claimed by the Chocokeeps after it was tangled in a nearby tree and abandoned. Galvanth's Spire is a watchtower whose name is taken from the great Gelmoran ruler Galvanth the Dominator. Legends say he could slay 10 Ixal with a single thrust of his spear. In the wake of the calamity, a single tree root endured the geological upheavals caused by Dalamud's falling shards and Bahamut's fury, as if forgotten by Nofika herself. However, given the winding curvature of the giant root connecting Sorrel's Haven to Bent Branch, the Gridanians have come to see it as a blessing, and have since called it Matron's Leith. The Mirror Planks, aptly built on the shore of the Mirror, was built by the fishermen that made their living hooking the fish of the lake. In the past, it was used to transport lumber on barges, but it now services adventurers to their local residential neighborhoods. Lilystone is the stone island that juts from the center of the Mirror, named as such for the lilies that float in and around it on the water's surface. Nestled among the waters of Evershade is the Guardian Tree, an arbor rumored to be the oldest living tree in the whole of the Twelveswood. Within the Guardian Tree is the Great One, an elder elemental that watches over the denizens of the Shroud. From its branches grow a fruit that resemble a plum that is sought after from kitchens across the world, due to its curative properties. The Tamtara Deepcroft was constructed during the days of Gelmora as a burial site, and is still used by the Gridanians to this day. However, in the days leading up to the calamity, the Lambs of Dalamud cult foretold their deliverance. When their prophecies went unfulfilled, they descended into the Deepcroft and swore vengeance upon those who survived by using the interred bodies to summon a powerful void scent. The result was the corpse of Galvanth the Dominator becoming a host for a soul flayer. Thankfully, a party of brave adventurers removed the cult and their void scent. Hur Iuna Kotor then laid Galvanth to his final rest. Later, a novice adventurer, Edda, would invite her former adventuring party into the Deepcroft after her beloved Avir fell in battle. Racked with guilt and grief, Edda attempted to hold a dark ritual using Avir's remains, and summoned a creature in his likeness. That same wandering adventurer managed to lay Avir to rest, save Pyoreo, and Edda was lost to the abyss of the Deepcroft. Beyond the waters of the East Vein, Green Tier is the section of the forest the elementals permit men to cut down trees for lumber. One can rarely enter the area without hearing the sounds of chopping. Named after the woodcutter's overseer, Gabino's Bower is a cabin near Green Tier, where the members of the Botanist Guild work out of when on the job. Formed from the corrosion of rock revealing the underbelly of the cliffside, Naked Rock is home to herds of raptors and their fiercely guarded nests. Spirit Hold is the jail built by the Gelmorans to hold the forest's enemies, though it has fallen into disuse since the calamity and is now overrun by spirits and void scent. Some call it Warren's Hold, after the facility's first jailer. The western edge of the East Shroud sits near Gridania proper, and is the center of the city-state's thriving beekeeping industry. In the eastern sections is the territory of the Sylphs, and in the south is the Garlean stronghold completed shortly before the calamity. The plethora of flowers in the area makes it an ideal location for the beekeepers of the honey yard to set up their hives. Unfortunately, the honey created by the bees also draws all manner of fiends. The Sweetbloom Pier borders the Whispering Gorge, and serves as the port of call for the ferry traveling to and from Gridania. Passengers can enjoy the countless wildflowers and the aroma of nectar wafting through the air. Led by Rosa Hawthorne, the beekeepers of Full Flower Combe have gained renown for the excellent honey and beeswax their hives produce. As the name would suggest, the Nine Ivies is home to many species of ivy. The twin adders have increased their presence in the area to look out for encroaching sylphs and Garlean forces. Named after the legendary Hawthorne family, Scourges of the Mountains, The Hawthorne hut is home to the current generation of the family. Rolf, the head of the household and retired adventurer, welcomes visitors into a small cottage so that he may enjoy their company and their tales. Named after a legendary captain of the whalers, both God's Quiver and wood whalers can be found stationed at the watchtower known as Jocelyn's Spire. A Mara-sized spire was built in haste to monitor the Garlean forces who had marched on the Twelveswood from the northeast. As such, it is the newest watchtower. It takes its name from a former leader of the Gold Bulls, who perished in the Battle of Cartano upon engaging the Imperial army. Solace is the grounds granted to the Sylphs who have voiced their opposition to the summoning of Ramu, the Lord of the Leven. The Sylphs who live here abandon their homes in the Sylphlands and shun their crazed brethren. Castrum Oriens is the Garlean outpost raised near Baelsar's Wall, which lies on the border between the Black Shroud and Gridania. Larkskull is named as such for the birds that sing from its boughs. It is the buffer between Gridanian territory and the Sylphlands. Adventurers and travelers are expected to enter at their own peril. The Sylphlands are the native domain of the Sylphs of the Twelveswood. However, these Sylphs are not as friendly as the ones that live in Little Solace. They are followers of the primal Ramu that are touched by his corruption. They are hostile to outsiders, including the denizens of Little Solace, and have fostered poisonous mushrooms to protect the region, leaving their surroundings mired in a violet haze. In the folklore of the Sylphs, they believe that they were created by the Lord of the Leven. It is said that the trees of the forest came to distrust men in their selfish greed, and feared the swings of their axes and the heat of their flames. Thus did the trees call out for salvation, thereby summoning Ramu, who brought his leven bolts down upon man. The fruits that the trees bore were struck by his lightning, and from the charred seeds were born the Sylphs. They see themselves as guardians of the forest, and dutifully protect it from outsiders. Despite the myth describing Ramu as summoned by the forest, his human-like qualities imply that he is also a god worshipped by men. Scholars believe that he may be one and the same as Raugr the Destroyer, due to his control over lightning. In common myth, Ramu is a wise old man who harbors ancient secrets. However, the Ramu summoned by the tainted Sylphs is both judge and executioner to those who would defile the sacred land of the forest. Moonspore Grove is where the titular mushrooms grow, gargantuan fungi that purge foul elements from the air. Illuminated in the soft glow of countless moon spores, the seedbed is an ancient arbor converted into a nursery used by the Sylphs to grow and incubate their offspring, known as podlings. Gatherings and celebrations are held in the gold leaf dye as offerings to Ramu. The hanging barbs are the dwellings of the Sylphs, where they are precariously suspended from tree limbs. By reputation, the mighty thorns of the bramble patch are a playground to the Moogles. They seem to enjoy provoking the local beastkin and treants, and watch the chaos as the creatures attempt to no avail to pursue the Moogles into the thick tangle. The skyscraping ivory cathedral known as the Sanctum of the Twelve was built following the Age of Endless Frost in the 5th Astral Era, a time when the world was overrun with famine and disease, to serve as a place of refuge and respite. Soon after, it fell to ruin and was all but forgotten until the 7th Umbral Era saw need of it once again. In the days of the 5th Astral Era, the city of Amdaport flourished amongst the trees of the South Shroud. Now, the lumberline trade route cuts from the north to the south, and merchants traveling the path remain wary of brigands and thieves looking to pilfer their wares. Gridania rests to the north of the South Shroud in the upper paths, where the lumberline enters the area from the Central Shroud. Following the calamity, Gridania shifted its focus of surveillance work towards the invading Imperials. Though it was once manned by a sentry named Buscaron, this lookout post has since fallen into disrepair and disuse. Buscaron Struthers is a pub run by a disenfranchised former sentry that took up tavern keeping and welcomes all into his doors, from the rich to the poor, as long as they keep to the Druthers' simple rules: sit down, forget your worries, and savor your ale. Named after a creature in Pajali folklore, the Thousand Maws of Totorak is a natural cave system beneath Silent Arbor that once housed Gridania's foulest criminals, from arsonists to poachers, but it was closed upon the Seedseer Council learning that the jail cells had been converted into torture chambers by the jailers, and opened a new jail closer to the city. By abandoning the dungeon, however, it became a vile hive for monsters in their wake. Isamhar is a massive gaping hole among a thicket off the path, created when an enormous boulder fell from the sky during the calamity. The tavern leads into the untouched ruins of Gelmora, and the near-endless maze of the Palace of the Dead. Through many failed excursions to explore the Gelmoran ruins beyond Isamhar, the Wood Whalers turn to adventurers to uncover the truth of the depths within. The caverns below are numerous, almost endless. A mire of fog saps the strength of those who enter, as though death itself is creeping among the haze. Because of the specters seen within, adventurers have taken to calling it the Palace of the Dead. It has been reported that the erstwhile adventurer and conjurer Edda has been seen within its infinite halls, but she does not seem to be among the living. Another being known to wander the ruins is Nybeth Obdulord, an immortal shade who has experimented with necromancy. The lower paths are the entryway to the Twelveswood from Thanalan, where travelers are met with the murky swamp of Roots Lake and the ruins of Amdapor. Camp Tranquil is the Gridanian outpost manned by the Sixth Spear, led by the former Company of Heroes member Captain Landinel. It is held aloft by a large rock structure that juts out from the swamp. The lost city of Amdapor was once shrouded by the elementals since the time of the Sixth Umbral Calamity, preventing man from returning and misusing the relics that still remain. However, since the calamity, the ward has weakened, and the weakened earth-aspected ether has led to the ruins being overrun by fetid fungi and spores. In the days of the Fifth Astral Era, the art of white magic was born here by the Amdapori, but their Maki rivals sent their Void-Sent armies to destroy them, led by the powerful Void-Sent Diabolos. Weakened by Diabolos' attack, Amdapor was lost to the waves of the calamity. Diabolos was sealed away during the assault, but was freed by Bahamut's fires. A group of adventurers entered the ruins to cleanse them of the blight, and humbled Diabolos to retreat. Upon a second excursion into the lost city, the adventurers were contracted to remove the Amdapori sentinels that still remained, awakened by Diabolos' presence. The marshes that make up the lower paths are known as Roots Lake. Travelers passing through can find safe passage across the bridge suspended between the rocks and trees. Constructed by Highwind Skylines to fly cargo into the Shroud, the South Shroud landing has been abandoned after the increased Imperial activity. Now it is a black market location for poachers and illegal traders to push their stolen goods. It is said that in ancient times, Lady Earth gave her lifeblood in exchange to seal the dark divinity Odin inside a crystal prison beneath the waters of the Shroud. To honor her sacrifice, the land that houses Odin's prison is named after her to this day. Earth's fount is the crystal inside which Odin is contained. Odin is a masked horseman that rides atop his steed Sleipnir. Some say he is a demonic being that has roamed Eorzea since the days of the Allegan Empire, leaving all who oppose him in twain with his dark blade Zantetsuken. How he is able to roam despite his crystalline prison is not clear, but scholars have theorized that the primal's main body is the sword itself, taking its wielder as its host as the new Odin, allowing him to resurrect time and time again across the millennia. A study by the students of Baldesion has unearthed that Zantetsuken is an extension of the primal Eureka, that has the power to produce magical weapons of untold power, each with a sentience of its own, capable of controlling those who wield them. Should you be the one to slay Odin while he is stalking the Black Shroud, your Warrior of Light will be crowned the new Odin and don his dark armor as the cycle begins anew. According to a Gridanian legend, Snake Molt is named as such for the great serpent that shed its skin, remaining for thousands of years without decay, until one day it vanished, leaving behind a single scale. Historians believe this was a wingless, legless worm, though the matter remains in debate. Created to defend the ancient city of Amdapor, the stone stronghold of Amdapor Keep was long hidden within the tangle of the Twelveswood by the same ward the elementals maintained over the city itself. During the War of the Magi, the keep fell to a Maki assault after the Amdapori managed to retreat. Since the wards were lifted, the Lambs of Dalamud once occupied the ruins, seeking to summon the self-same Void-Sent that saw to the keep's fall. Silent Arbor is the area that the elementals permit hunting. However, this has also led to concern, as it is populated by Makote poachers and Duskwhite bandits. Upon the Gelmorans migrating from their caverns to the forest proper, Quarry Mill was founded as the location for rock and stone to be harvested for use in Gridania's construction. The water wheels around the hamlet power the large hammers that render the stone into workable blocks. The nearby village of Balbury was abandoned after the calamity. In their absence, the notorious band of outlaws known as the Red Belly Wasps have taken up residence. The Wood Whalers and the Wasps often skirmish here, attempting to reclaim it for the rightful owners. Taker's Rot is the name of the lair of Makote poachers that call themselves the Curl Claws. The Gridanian sea criminals is rotten to the core, thus bringing about this curse of a name onto the camp. Muntui beans are fermented and made into drinks and spices in the Muntui cellars, being regarded as a Gridanian delicacy. However, 3/4 of the cellars have been destroyed by a cave-in as a result of the calamity. The North Shroud borders the Ishgardian region of Kurthus, and serves as the foremost battleground between the God's Quiver and the XIV war balloons that descend from Xelphatal. Just beyond Gridania's Yellow Serpent Gate, Treespeak is named after the closely knit branches of the canopy. A meandering breeze through the boughs sound as though the elementals themselves are whispering. Treespeak Stables is an offset of the Mughals' gift mounts, Rookery, serving the North Shroud with the same birds bred and raised in Bent Branch. Etat Spire is a watchtower named after a Pagil conjurer who made great contributions to the art of conjury. Believed to be the dwelling of an elemental, the blessed bud sprouted from a stump. It is said that passerbys can feel the force of its vitality. The historical location of the Gelmorans' first communion with the elementals, allowing Gridanians to live in the Twelveswood, Peace Garden continues to honor those conjurers. On the precipice of Gridanian and Ixali territory, Hurstmill serves as a supply outpost for the God's Quiver. It is also surrounded by Gelmoran ruins and seemingly out-of-place creatures such as the Deep Void Death Mouse. Alder Springs was once a dense grove of giant alders before the flames of the calamity burned it down to a charred graveyard. Today, only its name remains. In contrast to the rest of the hamlets of the Twelveswood, Fallgourd Float was built not by clearing trees, but by floating atop a lake. The Bobbing Cork is Fallgourd Float's inn, which promises that its beds are so soft that weary travelers will feel as light as a cork floating upon a still pond. Lorentel Spire is a watchtower named after a legendary hero who loved Eugenia, the namesake of another watchtower. Finder's Bluff is named as such from the miners from Ul'dah who built this humble shack while surveying the mineral wealth of the surrounding area. Cloud Creek is the area where the Ixal have claimed territory since their banishment. Beneath this area is the capital of Gelmora, where one can find the remains of their strongholds and an entryway into the tunnels. Home to the White Rams, the final watchtower is named Eugenia's Spire after another legendary hero, and lover of the hero of Lorentel. The Quivermen stationed here often quarrel with the Ixal, strategically placed on the outskirts of their territory. Ever spurned by their banishment on behalf of the elementals, the Ixal continue to harvest the trees in Proud Creek with reckless abandon. Given the distance between Xelphatal and Nadalin, the Ixal tie their logs to their balloons powered by airstone to transport them effectively. The Ixal, in their desperate attempts to reclaim their ability to fly by creating their dirigibles, have long yearned to return to their ancestral homeland in the sky, Eadalin. What the Ixal have yet to uncover, or at least make known to the whole of their kind, is that they are actually the product of Allagan experiments. The Ixalian were bird-like chimeras created by the Allagans at Azys Lla as flying soldiers for use in their campaign to conquer the realms that did not fall under their banner. Rather than being beckoned by their goddess Garuda to cleanse the lands below of plague, letting it spread to the skies above, their ancestors were ordered by a female commander named Garuda to descend and harry the rebellious nations. Despite the differences in detail, one cannot ignore the similarities between history and legend. And with that, the tale of Gridania comes to a close. What remains is for you to discover in your own adventure. If you stayed with me until the end, please give this video a like and comment down below if you learned something new today. Also, feel free to let me know what other stories you'd like to hear. And subscribe for more Final Fantasy XIV content.